So today I'd like us to consider what have been identified as three layers of emotion. Um, if you're interested where this came from, it's from a gal called Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she wrote a book a while ago, maybe 10 years, called How Emotions Are Made. That's completely fascinating, and most of the content was entirely unfamiliar to me, which uh, yeah, so there you are. All right, so I don't know about you, but particularly when I was in the throes of burnout at the medical job, um, I would find myself feeling as though I just had this undercurrent of anger and frustration, especially frustration, I think that's the better word, all the time. I woke up with it. I went to bed with it. Woke up in the middle of the night with it. Just this unbelievable frustration that I really felt like was happening to me. I really felt as though that emotion of frustration was coming at me externally instead of being created internally by me and by my subconscious thoughts. As I have been revisiting burnout now a little bit with my coffee shop, I know a little bit more, and so I can see how misguided I was some years ago when the other burnout was happening. So it turns out that we create our emotions. They don't just happen. And intellectually, maybe you already know that, but I wonder if you really internalize that information. Three layers start with the first, which is affect. And that's really how we feel emotion in our body. Now, if you had asked me 20 years ago, where do you feel that frustration in your body? I would have given you a completely blank stare and said, I don't. But it turns out that's because I was then incredibly well defended. And I expect most of you are too. It's the nature of the business we're in. You have to be defended. But the fact is, the affect is layer one, and it is a physiologic response to the emotion. And to give you an example, it turns out that if you do functional MRIs on brains of people who are excited about something or anxious about something, the functional MRIs look identical. Who knew? That's interesting to me. And that physiologic response matters because once our brains register that, then comes layer two of emotion, which is meaning. And that's where we all get hung up when we're dealing with emotions. If I'm looking away from you, it's because I'm looking over here at my notes. I apologize. I'm not good at this yet. I'll get better. So meaning is what our brain does, and we create a story around whatever just happened in our body that we may or may not even be aware of. And most of the time, this meaning that we create is based on a previous experience of a similar situation. So if someone cuts you off in traffic, you have a rush of all sorts of neurotransmitters, all sorts of affect happens in your body, all sorts of possibly angry emotions happen. Your brain immediately registers that, and the next time someone cuts you off in traffic, that response is going to be much more instantaneous, and pretty soon there's a neural pathway that's rubber cemented into your brain. Keeping in mind that the brain's biggest goal is to avoid pain and seek pleasure, it's pretty easy to see how quickly those very pathways, especially the avoid pain one, because that's the fundamental job of the brain, avoid pain, keep us safe, to see how quickly that can be rubber cemented. Our brains are constantly making meaning. out of whatever sensations arise in the body. And there's a feedback loop there, which I just alluded to rather clumsily. But the more of a response you're having in your body, the more your brain's going to create a story. The more response you have in your body, the more that, there you are. Keep in mind that when I say meaning, what I mean is thought. And what's interesting is that, we are very complex beings, but it turns out, according to Lisa Feldman Barrett, that 80% of what we think today, we already thought yesterday, and the day before, and the day before. So most of our minds are kind of on this continuous loop that just thinks the same things over and over again. If we focus this down to our professional lives, I can guarantee you that I thought the same things over and over again, especially when it came to negative things that I perceived and that were real about work environment, about the state of healthcare, yada, 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 all of it. But knowing our brain's negative bias, it's really easy now for me to see that happen and see how meaning and affect work together and reinforce each other so quickly, especially if this is all about negative emotion. That pathway is just, an Autobahn in our brains. That brings me to layer 3, which is a dangerous one, but one that's a little easier to fix, and that's judgment. So you notice you're feeling some certain way. You may be able to slow your brain down and identify a thought that might have triggered that affect and that emotion. You may not. But a lot of times what happens for me is then I end up saying, I shouldn't be feeling that way. I mean, come on. Or I should be doing this differently instead, and then I wouldn't feel that way. And then we cue shame and blame, and then we bark up that tree, and we're back at square one, more focused on shame and blame and negativity than we are on what's real. That shame and blame, that judgment, even most of the meaning and thoughts we're creating around these emotions, it's all special effects department. It's noise. It's not real. And it's so easy to get lost in that trap of judgment in particular. So how do we fix all this? Well, like with anything else, being aware is the first step. And so just be aware if you walk into a patient's room and you kind of notice some weird clenching in your gut, take a minute and wonder why. Did you have a horrible interaction with this patient's family earlier in the week? Do you just dislike the guy as a human? You're allowed, that's okay. You don't have to like everyone you're taking care of, but notice in your body those little signals. And then when you notice judgment, I should not be feeling this way about my patient that I'm supposed to be helping and taking care of. Just, let that shit go. It's not helping. It's not useful. It's not serving you. The fact is you had this physiologic response to this patient, and that's okay. It's interesting. So let's get curious instead and say, what am I making this interaction mean? What am I making this patient encounter mean? What did I make the unpleasant encounter I had with the family 2 days ago? What did I make that mean about me? And I wonder if you can just sit with that statement for a minute. What am I making this mean? Actually, it's a question, not a statement. If you can, just sit with that and notice how that actually empowers you to take control of what's happening in your body in that moment. Now, this is simple, but it ain't easy, and it takes practice, and I still get lost in all my own mired swamp of feeling, instead of always slowing down and saying, wait a minute, what thought triggered this, and what am I making, what story am I telling myself? But I'm better at it now, and I don't know, I hope it helps for you as you traverse your workday. I wish I would have had these tools some years ago because it would have helped me. Bye.